There's an old story from the Arthurian legends. The Knights of the Round Table set out to search for the Holy Grail, but none knew where to begin. So each knight entered the forest that surrounded Camelot at the place he feared the most. Because the residence of your greatest fear reveals the area of great weakness, and perhaps also the site of your greatest transformation. You see, heroes move towards fear. Darth Vader spent his life trying to escape it, and that is why fear made him.
Interesting.
Hello and welcome to HDPhilosophy, the channel where we take some time with the classics to bring our lives into high definition, and this is episode 4 of Darth Vader in Street Fighter 6, the Philosophy series. In today's video, we examine how fear made Anakin become Darth Vader. Carl Jung famously wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is a quote many would later on paraphrase to say in Latin, "Instor colinus invenitur," which translates into, "In filth it shall be found." You see, the area of your transformation doesn't exist in your realm of comfort, but rather the places that you have been avoiding. See, as you avoid things, and as you ignore the chaos on the borders, it never goes away. It sits there and waits like Scar did for Mufasa. It hides in the deep like Jaws, waiting for an opportunity for you to let your guard down, and then it strikes. That is why, when embarking on the greatest quest they could imagine, the Knights of Round Table decided to start their journey by allowing fear to dictate their path. That's where they're going to move. They're going to go into fear. You see? Because fear often points towards the underdeveloped part of ourselves, our universe, the areas of which we ignore and, more importantly, avoid. You see, the dragon guards the treasure because transformation is costly. There's a reason why you're avoiding these areas. You know the battle could be costly. You know it could destroy your life. That is why many choose ignorance instead of truth. Janoff Ballman has a great book on trauma as being shattered illusion. The areas that you avoided because you didn't want to know the truth. Imagine a woman whose husband is cheating on her, and it's been going on for 20 years. She sees the subtle signs, but she ignores them. She would rather remain in ignorance because she's built a life with this individual, a life that she understands and a life that she knows. You see, in this sense, that which she fears dictates her universe. She doesn't acknowledge the obvious because she'd rather live in the comfort. You see, in this way, fear is in control. You are not confronting fear. You're allowing it to dictate your borders. But the thing about fear is that it never remains in the borders. It slowly encroaches on your life little by little until you're in a box of its own making. Avoidance preserves the weakness. The hero, though, enters the darkness voluntarily because he understands something important. Confrontation creates the necessary growth, the strength that is needed in order to succeed and overcome the dragon. Much like in Jaws, they ignored it long enough and then had to go into the ocean, into the deep, and fight it in its own environment, the area of which they exiled this fear into. And this is a confrontation as old as time, and it exists in every single one of us, because every single one of us is avoiding something. It could be the new check engine light in your vehicle, or in Anakin's case, it is the fear of loss and the helplessness and uncertainty that comes along with it. And instead of entering into those fears, he tries to eliminate them. He seeks control, certainty, and domination. And this is where the tragedy begins. You see, he goes to Yoda for advice. And Yoda tells him, train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. Now, many people just pass this off as unrealistic advice, but there's a lot of wisdom in this statement, because here was an area that he needed repaired. His incessant need to control everything and believe he had the ultimate power to do so. He ignored that warning, and it ultimately led to his ruin. And this is where Epictetus becomes essential in this discussion. In the opening line of the Enchiridion, he states, "Some things are up to us and some things are not." You see, we need to understand and distinguish between the things we can control and the things we cannot. We can control our judgments, our choices, and our responses, but you know what we cannot control? Death, fate, or the actions of others. But Anakin cannot accept this distinction. He cannot tolerate the uncertainty of the world, the mortality of the world, all encompassed in his dream of possibly losing Padme. So instead of allowing fear to show him the path on his Grail quest, a way he could have mastered himself, he attempts to master reality itself, and reality always wins. It is the 10 out of 10 probability. It is the reigning champion. You see, for the Stoic Epictetus, he seeks control over the self, but Vader seeks control over existence. And this is why power never frees him. He could have gained power in the sense of self-mastery. He could have gained power by allowing fear to reveal his areas of his greatest weakness. But what he doesn't learn is the sheer fact of him trying to dominate the world more and more, the more terrified he becomes of losing that control. Isn't it amazing how Yoda's quote of training yourself to let go mirrors what his daughter would say in one of the opening lines of A New Hope? The more you squeeze, the more systems will slip through your fingers. For Anakin Skywalker, his fear became his obsession, not his enlightenment. And so that obsession became tyranny, and then tyranny became slavery. Epictetus warns us, no man is free who is not master of himself. And Vader never became a master of himself. He became a servant to fear. One of my favorite sections in the Enchiridion that really highlights this teaching from Epictetus talks about Socrates, who was reminded to prepare for his trial, where he says, "Do you not think that I have been preparing this entire time? I have maintained that which was in my own power. How then have I never done anything unjust either in my private or in my public life?" You see, I challenge my nursing students all the time, every single semester, with the question of the trolley problem, specifically to see if they would cede their morality, their good life, to that which is outside of their control. Because in the classic trolley problem, there's a trolley heading towards 5 people, and you can choose to divert it and send it to the one. Now, a person who is focusing on that which is in their own control, if I flip this switch, my intention is to save those 5, but I am killing that one with my own control. Now, of course, there's an argument here that since I'm by this switch, to not act is an act in and of itself. But at the same time, make no mistake, if I flip that switch, my action has now killed that one.
That's right, he can be taught.
Where they would have been safe otherwise. Now, where the things outside of your control come into the equation is that people flip this switch because they're like, the result of the action is that one will die instead of the 5. When you cede your morality to things that are outside of your control, you better be ready to be judged by that as well. Because what happens if the trolley cannot make that turn and it's going too fast? It falls on its side and it rolls through all 6. You see, the person will run from the consequentialist judgment that they were seeking before and instead return to the intention argument. My intention was to save the 5. Yes, but see, your action flipped the trolley and now it killed all 6. They ceded the morality to something outside of their control. And then when judgment arrives, they run back to that which was in their control. So one must have the wisdom to understand that which is in their control and that which is not. And for Vader, that was too difficult of a lesson for him. See, one of the greatest quotes is from Jordan Peterson's book on Maps of Meaning. That when you choose to avoid something, the ambivalent world recognizes what you fear. It is a warning against avoidance. Because sometimes you avoid the things that are most necessary for your growth, for your transformation. But in order to do that, in order to confront that willingly, requires one of the most important of virtues, courage. And for that, we turn to C.S. Lewis in the Screwtape Letters. See, C.S. Lewis writes, "Courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at its testing point." Every single virtue requires an amount of courage, because what does it take to be honest when you're under pressure? What does it take to have mercy when you're in incredible pain? What does it take to love when you've lost so much? And what does it take to sacrifice when you are in danger? You see, fear reveals whether virtue is genuine, because you need to have the courage, or for the Confucians, the uprightness to stand firm against the winds of conflict. So then it is fear that reveals whether virtue is genuine. And that is exactly what happens to Anakin. His love is tested by fear, and it collapses. His love becomes a possession when it is under pressure. His need to protect becomes domination when it is tested. Therefore, his compassion becomes control. You see, fear doesn't create your character. It reveals it. What are you willing to stand for? One who doesn't stand for something will fall for anything. That's how courage is so fundamental. So from that fear, Anakin starts believing that all the problems are external. Nothing's wrong with him. It's the Jedi's fault. I'll fight against faith. I won't accept death. Fear revealed an internal battle that he was unwilling to accept. Fear revealed his inability to endure vulnerability and to accept the mortality of reality. But most importantly, fear revealed his inability to suffer the things outside of his control without surrendering to domination. This is something C.S. Lewis warns in The Abolition of Man, that when fear and appetite rule without higher moral formations, man becomes fragmented. Power without virtue becomes monstrous, and that's exactly what Vader is. A man of immense ability, immense power, but without the inner structure needed to bear it. And this leads us to the archetypal hero's journey. For Knights of the Round Table, they allowed the enlightenment of fear to guide their way. They went toward the fear. They didn't run from it. I always think about Katrina and the storm that killed over 1,000 people. This is a classic example of people avoiding the areas that needed the most fixing. They knew the dams were insufficient. They knew the dikes were in genuine need of repair, but they kept putting it off. So when that powerful storm arrived, they weren't ready, and it killed over 1,000 people. But the question becomes, whose fault was it? It's easy to blame things that are not in your control, but for Epictetus, and for Socrates, and for C.S. Lewis, and for the heroes of the Knights of the Round Table, the warning signs were there and you refused to see them. So who's really at fault? You see, the hero enters the forest. The hero faces the dragon, not because he's fearless, but because he understands that transformation requires confrontation. You need to confront the areas that are announcing themselves to you as in genuine need of repair. We are all comfortable in our spots of control, but that's because we have tamped down the areas of chaos so that we can ignore the majority of the world and focus on what we want to will or want to love. But atrophy never goes away. The darkness never truly goes away. It just sits and waits. Just like Joseph Campbell stated in The Hero with 1,000 Faces, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasures that you seek. I like to tell my kids all the time, you are most ignorant in the areas of your greatest blindness. That is to say, there's a difference between what Socrates said, wisdom in knowing that you do not know the thing, and believing you know what you do not. It is really difficult for us to face the fears that we have put aside. But according to Carl Jung, what you're also putting aside may be the area of your greatest character growth, that which is required of you to become the hero. Anakin refuses the hero's path. He does not accept suffering. He attempts to abolish it through control. He does not face mortality. He attempts to conquer it. He does not transform himself. He attempts to force reality to obey his fear. And that's why the hero becomes a tyrant. The hero with no fear, as he was called in the Clone Wars, becomes subjugated to the very fear he was avoiding. So then what are we avoiding? Because this is not just Vader's story. It's a story of humanity. What kind of rejection, loneliness, inadequacy, or failure are we avoiding? And instead of confronting those fears, having the courage to ask yourself what they're pointing to, many just seek distractions, status, control, endless comfort. But see, avoiding the fear never makes it disappear. It grows and it gets stronger. That's why that Jordan Peterson quote had such a profound impact on me. Because when it arrives, if you banish it to the areas of the shadows, it doesn't just go away. It grows. It gets stronger and stronger. It's like a tax bill that you are avoiding. It doesn't just go away, it compounds. What was once a dragon becomes a leviathan. What was once a leviathan becomes a hydra as it implants itself in your world. Because fear compounds. And so the dragon gains strength and remains undefeated because we refuse to enter the forest. In the Revenge of the Sith novelization, even Matthew Stover, the author, describes Anakin's fear as a dragon, something that lies dormant within Anakin's soul, wrapping around his heart, poisoning his being. So you see, the dragon for Anakin was that fear and rage that existed within him that he refused to slay. You see, the Knights of the Round Table entered the forest at the place they feared the most because they understood something modern people often forget. Transformation begins where comfort ends. Heroes confront fear. Tyrants attempt to eliminate it. And Darth Vader became enslaved by the very thing he spent his life trying to escape. Because the things we fear the most are often guarding the people we were meant to become.
Thank you for watching HD Philosophy. Like, share, and subscribe.